Every year, hundreds of people are reported missing in national parks and forests, many of them children. And most are eventually found, whether dead or alive. But a small percentage of the cases, some are never solved, that have search and rescue crews continuing to scratch their heads. Than 400 cases of people who wandered into the wilderness but never came back. Accounts of children, people
was a coyote,
vanishing,
dog, or
seemingly
else.
swallowed up by the many endless forests across America, or even later found in ways that defy
Did you see what it was?
logic.
An animal.
Was it a person or an animal or?
I can't tell. All I know is that my central light came on and I just happened to glimpse and see this thing running across the yard. A good-sized man.
She described the way that
like a man. I
the
don't know
creature
what it was.
moved as being
Okay. You've had
unnatural.
problems in the neighborhood
It looked
before?
like it was
Yeah, my dog was
uncomfortable
killed here
in its
just
own
recently.
feet.
I don't know what it was, but whatever it was, it was standing up. I'm out here looking through the window now, and I don't see anything.
She
I don't want to go
believed
outside.
that what she was looking at
Jesus
was
Christ,
pure
you better...
evil.
Sure. Tia,
Hello?
get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
That son of a bitch is about 6'9" up.
Do you
Many
see
of
him
the
now,
cases of
sir?
about
Yes, I'm looking
100
right
people,
at him.
at least, who claim that they've been abducted
hang
by
on.
aliens.
He's
One
right.
of Dr. Matt's
Is he in your
patients,
yard,
Linda,
sir?
Yeah,
who says
God,
she
he's
has been
big.
Faded out,
abducted
like
since childhood.
reality. I was just
what I remember
being brought up this
through,
tunnel
my
of
wall
light,
came
right?
from being around my
Out
bed.
of this tunnel, I
I
just
ran between
like
them
noticed
and ran
parts
out
of my
of the
life
room
that
into
wouldn't
my
even
mother's
occur to me to
room to
remember.
hide
Then I
from
knew
it.
that I
And
wasn't
I
in
never
my
told
body,
anybody
that I
about
was
that, and I just buried it
closed.
in the back
And so
of my
then I
mind.
came to the
Me
end
and
of
my
this
brother,
tunnel
we never
and noticed there
spoke
was
about
a
it.
man that first
I
searched me
noticed
at first as
a
a place
mist or a fog
and I
kind
saw
of moving.
mountains that had
The
died
action, the
that
motion
year.
caught my
Then
eye. It
the
actually
wizard,
started
without
taking
moving his
shape,
mouth,
taking
spoke to me and
form.
said,
The
"Struggle,
idea
you're
of the
too
Grim
young to
Reaper
die."
went through my head, cloaked figure. And as I was watching, it kept becoming more and more and more distinct to me that this was actually something with some type of presence. Like it knew I was there. And as I was watching it, it turned and looked directly at me. I felt like whatever this was angry at me. I wasn't welcome. It wanted me out. I had been face to face with a ghost or a demon, a spirit. I'm not really sure what. But this feeling of terror actually was going through me. And I really felt more that it was demonic. It was something very evil.
Hey everybody,
doing?
welcome to Real Supernatural Encounters. I have my guest today, Travis, and he has some encounters to tell. But before he does, would you go ahead and introduce yourself, Travis?
Hey, my name's Travis. I'm from the Dallas, Texas area. So I'm 38 years old. I'm happily married with 2 kids. I've got 2 boys, 5 and 7 years old. And I grew up in what you consider like normal, if you can consider what normal is today, life or family life. And I've got several siblings myself, and went through high school. College wasn't exactly for me, so I joined the Marine Corps in 2001, and I was in the Marine Corps from 2001 to 2007. And since then, I have been in sales jobs and account management jobs. I feel like I connect with people pretty well, and so sales has kind of been my navigation through my career so far. That's it.
Okay. Well, Travis, if you're ready, man, go ahead and start with your encounters and experiences.
Sure. So me personally, I've always been curious about life outside of what we know to be existent on Earth. I've always been curious about it, and I think people that know me best probably know I've kind of been into UFOs to an extent. But I wouldn't say that I really looked into UFOs or researched anything about it until several years ago, about 4 years ago. And after looking into it, started paying more attention to the sky. Would go in the backyard and look up in the sky much more often than ever in the past. And kind of randomly, I back in 2018, towards the end of the year, towards Christmas, I think it was like December 22nd or so, I was grilling some salmon in the backyard, 8:30 at night, and something I do quite often, like to grill. And I'm out there. I know I have about 10 minutes to waste until it's about ready. So I have a twin sister I'm real close with, so I called her. And at the time, she was going through Austin Police Academy. And so definitely trying to catch up with her and see what she's going through. And I'm just kind of walking around the backyard, just kind of piddle pedaling, doing circles, got her on speakerphone. And I look up in the sky towards what would be considered like downtown Dallas. I live in a suburb of Dallas called Richardson. And I see what looks like a dark blanket at the time in the distance. And I would say it was roughly around towards where downtown Dallas would be. And so I'm looking at this thing and trying to figure out logically, like going through a Rolodex in my mind as it's getting closer and closer, more above me. What is this? And at first I thought weather balloon. And I was like, nope, not a weather balloon, because it wasn't like, I didn't see any like air or wind impacting as it was coming across. And as it got closer and closer, I started noticing certain features of it. And it had what seemed to be like dark V's on what I would consider the belly. And at that time, still logically trying to guess what the heck I'm looking at, I thought all of a sudden maybe it was like several V's of flying birds. And then as soon as I thought that, I noticed there was no wavering. It seemed to be like a solid uniform object. And then as soon as it was like straight above me, I realized that I am looking at something like otherworldly. And my sister's still on the phone, and I'm like probably saying random cuss words, trying to figure out, she probably has no idea what's going on. And at that moment, I'm like, okay, do I take a picture or do I just go grab somebody? And it was pretty dark, no clouds out, the moon was out. And at that point, I only had a couple seconds technically, it was in the moment. And I was like, there's no way a picture from my iPhone will take, a good picture and do it justice. So I ran into my house to grab my wife, and I was like screaming bloody murder, like, come outside, come outside. And so anyway, she comes outside, follows me out there, has no idea what I'm getting her to do. She was on the couch watching some reality TV show or something. And she comes out barefoot. And I'm like standing over in our bushes by our fence, like pointing as this thing has already kind of passed over my house. And it's heading towards what I would consider to be like Frisco, McKinney area outside of Dallas. And of course, at that time, she has no idea what I'm pointing at, no idea what to look for. But me personally, I could see that this thing now looked like it had like depth to it, like it had a bottom and a top. And if I was to describe what it looked like, it had no wings, no propulsion that I could see. It was not a blimp. It was nothing logically that I could explain. It had almost like a white glowing luminescence coming off the belly of it. Oops, sorry. And maybe that was from the city lights, I'm not sure, but it almost seemed like it was like a cloud. Like it looked like it was not reflection. It looked like it was like just somehow part of the craft. The craft was emitting this. I don't know how to explain it, but it was like a white luminescence. No lights of any kind. And this thing is gigantic. I guess the reference mothership is kind of like what I would compare it to. It looked like it could have been the size of a city block. I don't even know. It was very high elevation. I live in an area where there's like 4 airports around here, and I see airplanes all the time. And again, I was in the Marine Corps, so I was around a lot of aircrafts. I was in logistics, so we did a lot of helo extraction stuff and was always on flight lines. And so I'm not necessarily an expert, but I definitely have been experienced and around aircrafts and aviation in my life. I also did aviation detailing for quite some time after, for a couple of years. And so therefore just have, I guess, a little bit more experience around airplanes. So anyway, at that time she's outside and I'm pointing this thing and she has no idea what to look for. And next thing I know, she goes, when is dinner gonna be ready? And I was like, oh my gosh, my wife. I was like, my wife probably thinks my wheels have fallen off. She's going to take me to the hospital. So anyway, the salmon's pretty much ready. She goes back inside and I'm like, still like the feeling I got in the moment when I was looking at this thing and past the point of when I was like going through the Rolodex on my mind of logical explanations. As soon as I realized this thing was like otherworldly, it like gave me a shock and panic all at the same time. is the best way I can explain it. I felt like like a deer in the headlights or a deer being aimed at from a feeder. When I looked away from it to run into the house to grab my wife, it was like I was even more scared, not looking at it as I was running in. So I just something interesting. I kind of took note that could just be a me behavior based on having an experience like that for the first time. But that's kind of what happened. And as soon as she had gone back inside, I'd actually posted on Reddit. I was pretty vague purposely, actually. Also didn't have a lot of time, but I posted something in reference to just, big dark object, not necessarily fly, but like coast or glide over where I live, no sound. And I gave a very brief description, and I explained where it was heading. So in hopes that maybe someone in that area would get the chance to look up in time. Within 10 minutes after, there was a lady that had written me back from Reddit, and she had said that her husband and son were in the backyard and that they had seen something too. And just real short background on her, just getting to know her slightly off a couple messages. She told me that she's kind of the UFO nut in her house, and they don't really talk about it, and she's the only one. And so she told me that she gave me a quick story of how that went down for her. And she had said that she was like approaching the sliding glass door on the back of their house. Maybe she was doing dinner too, I don't know. And as she was approaching, seeing her son and husband, she said she swears that her husband told the son, "Don't tell your mom." And as soon as she opened the sliding door, she could tell that her son was somewhat kind of disturbed. And the husband said it's so odd to see birds flying in V's this time of year. And as soon as she said that, I was like, oh my gosh, that was exactly one of the things that I thought it was at first. I could see these like V-like structures off the belly, but just with deductive reasoning, I determined that's definitely not what it was. It was a uniform object. My best description of shape, I would say it was like an oyster shell shape. And I actually did quite a bit of internet searching afterwards to see if I could, of course, find validation like anybody else, and try to see if anybody else had experienced something or cited something like that. And there was someone out in the kind of the South Texas area, the Gulf area. I think it was Pasadena, Texas. And they actually had a video of the craft that looks very similar to what I saw. And anyway, I could definitely try to share it with you if I could come by it again. So that was essentially the first experience. And from there, 2 months later, I was in my backyard again around the same time. And I had the month prior, so there was about 2 months separation between my first sighting and my second. And within the middle of those 2 months, I was in my backyard. Just something I took notice of. There was an owl. I heard this like almost like baby noise. And I look up in our live oaks that are all over, top of our house in our backyard. And I see an owl up there. And I know that's not odd, but it's something I've never seen around here. Being in Dallas in a very highly populated area, I just don't see stuff like that. I could definitely understand being more rural areas where you would. But around here, it's like maybe the zoo is the closest thing you get to something like that. But anyway, just something I took notice of. And the reason why I bring that up is my second sighting, which happened 2 months later, around the same time in the backyard. I was grilling again. I don't know if it was salmon, but I was standing, and we have like a concrete driveway that kind of cuts into our backyard. And I was standing there, and I was just kind of just doing nothing, and I noticed a owl again. And so I'm like searching for where I hear this owl noise coming from, or this owl call. I don't even want to try to mimic it. It's I'd sound ridiculous, but it sounded like a baby, kind of a baby cooing is the best way I could describe it. And I noticed how odd it was because of the sound. It sounded like it was projecting from this tree that's in my neighbor's yard behind my back fence, essentially towards the same direction that I'd seen the first UFO. And looking for this owl up in this tree, and everything's so dark, never see it. But the weird thing about it was the noise, it would go, it would go coo, coo, coo. And then there would be like a couple seconds and then it would do it again, like in a succession, but it was almost as if it was like getting closer to me, but it didn't make sense. Like there was not enough distance, and this, anything with that would need, lift to fly, it would have to go a certain speed technically, and it just didn't make any sense. And so that was like something weird that I noticed in the moment. And then as soon as I kind of pinpoint where I'm seeing or hearing this noise come from behind the tree in the distance, the tree happened to be blocking, or must have been, there was this bright gold orb that was kind of going up at an angle, and it seemed to be like gaining speed as the time went on, as it continued on. And then out of nowhere, like an EKG, it did like an arc, and then it warp speeded away, like purely what I would expect like someone to describe warp speed. Of course, afterwards, no owl. The only way I would have even taken notice is looking for this owl. Otherwise, there's no way I would have seen it. No noise. And purely guessing or purely speculation, but it's hard to say how big potentially it was, but it seemed like maybe it was a mile or two out. Hard to say, but so maybe this thing was the size of a bus. I don't know. But backtracking, looking at anything logically, aside from like a Roman candle, I don't even know what it could have been. And it was too big to be a Roman candle. And I don't know of any Roman candles that arc and warp speed away. And also Roman candles have multiple shots. This is one orb, and it was gold and bright. Anyway, so that was my second experience. Something else, I'm a very self-aware person, or I feel like I am, and I'm intuitive to others. And I think that kind of goes along with my personality and being able to connect with people, maybe why I'm in account management and sales, or I've been successful at that. But something I noticed about myself was around this time frame, I kind of went through like almost like this weird overly positive for like 2 weeks mentality and attitude, and nothing could get me down. I could be behind the slowest truck on the way to work and be late, and it wouldn't even bother me. Anyway, just an interesting note. And the reason why I bring that up is because I've done a lot of research myself for the past 2 years, and personally, abduction stories or personal encounters with other beings and things of that nature, to me, are some of the most important to take from, especially that are genuine. And something I've noticed with certain people that have had these encounters, I've heard it expressed this positive feeling that fades out of nowhere and comes out of nowhere, and that fades away after time. And that is spot on exactly what I experienced. I'm not aware of any encounters myself personally, but that's just something I took note of, and just wanted to point out to you. From there, I haven't had any other experiences personally. I'm someone that 4 years ago, in terms of like spirituality and positive vibes and all that stuff, like I would have laughed at it or thought that was kind of hippie stuff. But I'm a very different person today. And who would have thought that it would have been looking into nuts and bolts UFOs, that like I would have like more spirituality now. I think that a lot of this has really opened me up personally to what could be out there, and the meaning of everything. Who knows? And so anyway, from that, I went and actually saw a psychic randomly, and she told me all kinds of interesting stuff. But I'm definitely more open to it. She, one of the things, and maybe this is a little deep, but after looking deeply into this stuff and having a couple accounts myself or sightings, and kind of going through these feelings that just seem to be similar to some of these experiences other people, abductees, experiences have had with this like positive feeling and stuff like that, really kind of opened me up to like astral projection and all that stuff, and just looking more into it. And there must be something to it. And I actually connected with someone that it seemed like they could essentially give me a little guidance. And I feel like, having a 5 and 7-year-old and being married and the world we live in today is pretty crazy. And so there's a lot of stressors in my life, just like anybody else. And I actually backtracked, wanting to engage with this guy after he gave me the opportunity to connect with him. because I was worried, like, what could I open up if I go down this path? Like, I don't want to add any more craziness or anything like that to my life. Like, I want to be able to handle things and control things the best I can. And I feel like doing that, it's kind of like letting go to control and opening up to the unexpected, essentially. And so I kind of backtracked. And what really caught my attention when I saw this psychic, actually the next day, I told her nothing about myself. And she essentially brought up that she could see, after talking what she called my spirit guides, that I had like a hesitation with being open because I was fearful of something that could hurt me. And she was like spot on to what I was going through mentally, connecting with this guy that could essentially give me some guidance in terms of, looking in the direction of astral projection or how to do it. And as soon as she said that, it was like, man, I'm gonna listen to everything this lady says. She hit it like right on the head. Anyway, so I'm definitely open to things now based on that. And looking into that stuff. And I don't know if you've ever looked at it, but like someone like Carla Turner that talks about abductions, she gives you kind of like the frightful side of these experiences that people go through that seem to be very terrifying and traumatic. It doesn't seem that every encounter is in that same type of nature. And I'm sure who knows how many different beings of any kind there are out there. But it really scared the crud out of me. And it really kind of like put me through a mind spin for a couple of days, like looking into some of the stuff and some of the terrifying accounts and people talking about that their soul could be taken from them and things of that nature. It's pretty scary. Or a clone could replace them on Earth, or they would go into this room on this supposed spaceship and they would see 20 of the exact same human beings as if they're all just ready to replace something. I don't know. And so it's pretty terrifying. And one of the things that I held on to most to bring myself back to at least a calm reality mentally was that I don't think this is happening to me or anybody in my family. And so that gave me some like solace, essentially. And I got over that. And then I was able to just continue looking at things, not so terrified in nature. So more so the reason why I wanted to reach out to you is my 5-year-old, he had a nightmare around the time that Dallas had that snowstorm, the freak snowstorm that we had. And that happened around February 17th, I think. And so that night I'm in bed, and next thing we know, I was on the couch. I was on the couch. My wife's in bed. And sometimes I get hot when I sleep, and somehow the couch, I don't know how, but I don't get as hot on the couch sometimes. So I'll sleep on the couch every once in a while. And my kid, my 5-year-old, I'm going to tell you about him real quick, and then I'll tell you the encounter, just to give you some back history on him. So he's 5, athletic, great personality, very matter of fact, not a storyteller, like Captain Obvious, like no filter even. Like sometimes we'll be somewhere and hopefully he's learned from these behaviors after us telling him no. But he would, like, if someone was overweight, he'd be like, Daddy, she's fat. Like he would like point out the most obvious things, very matter of fact, very black and white. Like, man, be quiet. Like you can't say that out loud. And stuff like that. And he's also a tough guy. He's a little shorter, but very athletic, very fast. And you call him small, short, precious, cute. It's like he gets a little, upset, not happy. He's got a chip on his shoulder because he's shorter. I'm only 5'7", 5'8" on a good day, 5'8", and so definitely got that from me. But anyway, so that's kind of the type of guy he is. He's like my little Rambo, or he loves Indiana Jones. Anyway, so February 17th, when we got that snowstorm here in Dallas, he had a nightmare, and nothing much to it. And later that day, it was bath time was over. Big brother, I got a 7-year-old also. He had like ringworm or something. So mom's in the other room putting this cream on his leg, and he's grabbing something out of the playroom, and the lights are off in there. He's like, "Can someone turn the lights on for me?" And I'm in the kitchen at the time, and I'm like, "Sure, man, I can do that." And I walk into the room, and it's something he's never even done before. And so I go, "Why do I got to turn the light on for you, man? Are you scared of something?" And he's like, "Yes." I was like, "What are you scared of?" He's like, "My nightmare." I was like, your nightmare? He goes, but it was real. And I was like, okay, well, can you tell me about it? And he was just about to start telling me about it. And then big brother and mom walked in the room, and it's like he shut up. Like I could instantly see there was like a behavior behind it. Like he didn't want to talk about it when they came in the room. Like he was only open to telling me, maybe because I approached it. I don't know. And so anyway, they left the room a couple of minutes later, and then he and I proceeded into his bedroom, and we had like a minute of free time, just him and I, before mom and brother came back in to read books before bed. And I go, so tell me about your nightmare. And he goes, there was a red one and a blue one, and they were in my room. I go, okay. I go, red one and blue one. I go, like beings? And he's like, yes. I go, like they had arms and legs? He's like, yes. I go, okay. I go, how did they come in your room? Did they come through your door? Or did they come through the door? And he goes, no, they came through the wall. And as soon as he said that, I was like, okay, that's a little different. And I even led on that, telling him door. And I go, okay. I go, can you tell me what they look like? And at that time, he told me that the red one was first. It essentially presented itself first. And he said that it had one eye, no arms, and had sharp teeth, and it had big feet, and it was short. And that's kind of all he told me at the time. And he said the blue one was also short, but a little taller than the red one. And it presented itself second based on what he had told me at that time. And he said, his words, it was like camouflage. And I was like, okay. I go, do you mean like, did it have like a face and eyes and stuff? He's like, no, it was like camouflage. So I took that as it was blue with arms and legs based on what he said, but no discernible features. And so I said, okay, man. I go, I'm just gonna let you know, you can talk to daddy about this. I go, if this happens again, I want you to tell me. And I said, can you draw these for me tomorrow? And he said, yes. And that was it. And so next day comes, and lucky for my wife and kids, she's a teacher. And of course they're in school, snow day. So no school for them, but our power was still going, and my computer, everything's, at home COVID. So all I need is a phone and a computer. So unfortunately for me, I had to keep working. And so I'm just sitting right here working away. This is our dining room table in our dining room connected to our living room. And he comes walking in by himself to me around 9 o'clock in the morning. And he approaches me and goes, Daddy, can I tell you more about last night? I was like, yeah, man, you can. And so he said, the blue one, it went through the ceiling. And I was like, it went through the ceiling. I go, can you show me which ceiling? Can you show me where? And he pointed to the ceiling right above this table I'm sitting at.
Oh, wow.
And I said, okay. And I said, you said they came through your wall. Can you show me where? And he pointed to the living room wall, which connects to his bedroom. And just randomly, I was on the couch, like right there next to all this too. And so I go, okay. I go, if you saw it go through the ceiling, I go, were you in your bedroom or were you out of your bedroom? I go, because I was on the couch right there. Did you see Daddy on the couch? And he said something like, it seemed like he was almost like confused. And he said something about, I was laying next to you on the couch. Now I actually think about that kind of scares me a little bit. And I'll explain why. But anyway, so thought that was pretty interesting. I could tell that he was couldn't exactly put all the pieces together just based on the way he was telling me these things. And so I asked him, I go, did they say anything to you? And he said, yes. And I go, okay, what did they say? And he said that they said, come closer, I want to marry you. And I was like, what did you say? And he said, they said, come closer, I want to marry you. I was like, oh, I go, did this really happen? And he's like, yes. I was like, okay, I'm just making sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I go, okay. I go, which one said that to you? You said the red one. I said, okay. I go, what did his voice sound like? I go, was it like a boy voice or a girl voice? And he said, a boy voice. I said, okay. I go, was it like a boy voice like yours or like mine, like a man, like an older man? He said, like yours. I said, okay. And I think that was kind of it in that moment. And again, I told him, if you think of anything else, tell Daddy. Unfortunately, my wife, she does not believe in any other life outside of human beings and everything on planet Earth. And so at that time, and at the same rate, like, I don't know as a parent, like, what's the best way to approach these things. I just know that mom doesn't believe in it. So I don't think that she's necessarily a good source for him to vent to in regards to this personally, just based on what I know. And so I said, maybe don't tell mom. I go, but you could definitely tell daddy. And if this happens again, tell daddy. And that was kind of it. And so later that night, it was my bath time, my turn for bath. We switch off every night. And so this was the next night from him telling me at first in the playroom. And he was the last one in the bathtub. Big brother already got out. And so he got out and I'm like, drying him off. He's like standing next to me. I'm sitting in a chair and like run him down. He's got a towel on him. And he goes, Daddy, can I tell you another thing about what happened? I said, yeah. He goes, the red one had big feet, bigger than your feet. And I was like, okay. And he said, the blue one, it was fast. And I was like, okay. I go, fast, like it moved fast? And he's like, yes. And I said, okay. And I think I wanted to at that time ask him more detail, like if he could give me more description. And he said, I don't want to talk about it anymore because it makes it feel more real. And so, man, this is coming out of my 5-year-old's mouth. And it just continues these behaviors that make me think that maybe this really happened, on top of just the wildness and randomness of the things he's told me so far. So anyway, I believe that was it that night. And then the next day came, and it's almost as if like he was like recollecting more of what maybe the dream or whatever happened as the days went on. And so next day, I think it was like Big Brother had soccer practice or something. So it was me and him for a couple hours by ourselves. And I had gone outside with them. We were playing in the backyard for a minute. And the most leading thing that I have asked him in this whole series of questions over time, something I forgot to mention is when he was sitting next to me telling me that they said, come closer, I want to marry you. One of the questions I asked him was, I go, how do you think they got here? I go, did they like come in on a ship or something? And at that time, he like didn't have an answer. I don't think he said yes. I think he said, I don't know, or something like that. But that was the most leading thing I asked him. And then the next day, so we're outside and I go, do you think they'll come back? And he said, yes. But then he goes, but they won't come back unless it's like cold. He goes, they like the cold. And I was like, how do you know they like the cold? And he goes, because it was cold on their ship. And I was like, what did you just say? And at that time, I asked him more questions about the ship that he had just mentioned. I asked him, where was it? And he like pointed above our backyard essentially. And I asked him, how did you get to the ship? How did you know it's cold on their ship? And he said, the red one and blue one floated me up to their ship. And I think that he said that in my dream, they floated me up to the ship, almost like, I don't know if he thinks it was a dream or he's gripping with reality of, did this really happen? Not part of reality that I know. It must have been a dream. I don't know. But that's kind of how he brought it up. And then that was it at that moment. We come inside and we continue on with our kind of night, I guess. And I ended up, I was about to bathe him and we go in his room. He's taking his clothes off in front of his bunk bed. And I go, and mom wasn't around. So I feel more freely to ask him questions because there's no way we can talk about this with mom in the room or around. And so I asked him, I go, where were they like standing next to your bed? If they came to your bed, you said. And he goes, well, they came through that wall where we had 2 pictures. And then he said that the red one, when it came through the wall, it was a dark oval when it came through the wall. And then when it came into the room, it turned into the red one, the red being. And he said the blue one, when it came through the wall, it was like a dark cube, like a geometric cube. And he said, then it turned into the blue thing. And he said, just like that. And he pointed at the empty space in between his ladder, like a square. And I'm like, oh my gosh, my 5-year-old just said this to me. And, you know, some of the things that you think about as a parent or anybody looking at this from a 5-year-old is like, man, what is he watching? And yeah, he watches Pokemon and stuff like that, but I don't think anything like that's on Pokemon. Just saying, geometric shapes coming through walls and then they manifest into the beings they are or whatever. I know there's like Pokemon balls. I'm not a big Pokemon fan, but anyway, to me that was quite a bit different. And so then I bathe them, and then we're done. And then we go in the kitchen. We have a little time to waste before mom and brother get back for bedtime almost. And we're in the kitchen, and I asked him, I go, were they nice or mean? And he told me neither. And then he kind of started describing as if like they were like made fun of him, like as if they were like jester like, almost like not mean, not nice, but they were kind of like prodding with him, kind of poking fun in a weird way, which I thought was interesting. Not even an option I gave him. And the next thing he said was, he goes, Daddy, he goes, the red one's feet, they were like that bird. I was like, that bird, what are you talking about? He's like, let me show you. Let me show you. And he made me follow him into our playroom. He turned on Netflix or Amazon, whatever it was. And he turned on Looney Tunes, and he pointed at Tweety Bird's legs being pole-like legs and gigantic disproportional feet. He said, they were like that, Daddy. So he was so adamant on showing me. And after that, I asked him, I go, how tall were they? And he was like showing me off of his body how tall they were. They like came up, the red one was the shorter one, and it like almost came up to his knee, which would be about a foot maybe based on his size. He's under 4 feet tall, maybe almost at 4. And he said that the red one came up to like a little up to his like almost like his thigh. So maybe that thing was like 1.5 to 2 feet, but it was a little bit taller than the red one. And that was the blue. And so he's getting pretty descriptive, and the way he's showing me, it's like as if like it was something you experienced in real life. Like, I don't know anybody that shows you off their body from a dream how tall something was. It's almost like as if it was something he experienced personally. So that was it from there on that night. Next day, I take him to the park, and we're swinging, just me and him. We just walk out there. Sometimes brother and him kind of, due to COVID, we're at the house all the time, not really seeing a lot of friends. So they kind of get at it every once in a while since they've been in each other's space so long. And so I took him for a walk to the park, which is right up the road. And we get out there and we get to the swings, and we're just swinging. And he goes, Daddy, he goes, the ship, he goes, it was a lot bigger on the inside than it was on the outside. And I go, what? He's like, yeah. He goes, it looked really small on the outside, but it was really big on the inside. And I've looked at this stuff, and a lot of abductees or experiencers that describe potentially the inside of a craft or ship, I've heard that mentioned many times, like as if like the interior was impossibly big versus or compared to what the outside of the craft looks like. And I don't even know how it'd be possible that he would even know if he was making this up to tell me that, or if he was feeding into anything. I mean, I don't think that's something that's commonly known for most people, unless you've actually like looked into this or you've had your own experiences in that nature or in that way. And that was one of the craziest things he told me, I thought. Also, he said while he was on the ship that there were 25-year-olds, and he actually recognized 2 of them, two buddies he has. Sorry, I got a call that just came in. So he was telling me about these 2 buddies that he had recognized. I'm actually the coach for his 5-year-old soccer team, and one of the kids is actually on our team, and he's the wildest, craziest one. And I've kind of been conflicted. I don't want to be out of bounds in any way at all, but part of me almost wants to ask this kid, like, have you had a dream about being on the ship or anything? But so he told me that, and then I asked him, I go, there were 20 other 5-year-olds on the ship. I go, how do you know that? And he told me that the bosses told him. He said the red one and blue one had bosses on the ship, and they seem to be bigger. And I asked him, I go, what did y'all do on the ship? And he said that all of the 5-year-olds were stuck in chairs. And I said, okay. and he said that they were trying to cut the metal off the chairs. And at that point, I don't really know how to navigate questions like that or to get more detail. I find it hard to believe that a 5-year-old is going to be able to describe it without me just running, in my mind on speculation. So I wanted to be as direct with this as I can and try not to lead personally. I feel like I'm in a position where I'm already ridiculed in ways because of I look into this. Of course, it's not something I share with everybody, but like with my wife, I don't want there to be the perspective that it's because of me that he's telling me this. He doesn't seem to be getting any enjoyment out of what he tells me. At times he tells me he doesn't want to talk about it. And the behaviors, that was kind of the last detail in terms of his first experience that he had told me. And the rest of that week, he instantly, the night after this nightmare, this event that occurred, he slept with Big Brother up in Big Brother's bunk bed, up in the top of the bed with him the rest of the weekend, which he's never done before ever. And then mom wouldn't let him sleep up there with Big Brother when the school week started following that weekend. And so I would find him in his bed like a mummy with the sheets tight over his face and like he's got like a flashlight embedded in like a bear that he uses kind of like a little night light under his bunk. And he was under that thing with that. And just the behaviors you would think that would go along with a traumatic event. And wouldn't go in doesn't like to be by himself, wouldn't even go in the bathroom by himself. I told him he had to take something back inside one time from the backyard. It was like a book. And he made me go with him. And we go in the house and I'm like, dude, why do you have to have someone go with you? You're just going in the house real quick. And he goes, our house is haunted. I was like, man, our house isn't haunted. With the stuff he's told me, I don't have any ghost experiences. Granted, I'm not going to discount anything. I've heard plenty from credible people, but nothing me personally, but I don't think that's what this is. So that was essentially his first experience. The second experience that he had, it happened actually just about a week ago now. I think it was like Thursday last week, which was I wrote it down. So the first one happened February 17th. The second event happened April 22nd, Thursday. And it was right around the same time. He sleeping in bed with mom and wasn't hot that night. And I heard one of our children running down the hallway, sprinting at like 2:40 in the morning. I looked at the clock and it was him, our 5-year-old, and he had a nightmare. So he gets in bed with me. Mom goes to the couch so he can get in bed with me. And I go, what's wrong, man? He goes, I had a nightmare. I go, okay. I go, can you tell me about your nightmare? He's like, can I tell you in the morning? I was like, that's fine. And honestly, it was 2 a.m. and I didn't think anything weird of it, to be honest. And so anyway, I ended up taking the kids to school that morning, when 6 hours came later. And I was just in the car with him. He's like the last stop, and we had about 20 minutes together. And so after we were just me and him, I asked him, I go, can you tell me about your dream, your nightmare? And I go, was it a dream or did it really happen? And he said, it really happened. I said, okay, well, tell me about it. And he goes to tell me that there was one being at first, and then it sounds like there were 2 that joined it at some point, and they were in a tree. And I said, okay. He called the first one like Statue Man. And he said that it like changed form into different things. And he said that one of the things it did, it made his arm on fire and water or something of that nature. And he said something like it was fighting with the other 2 beings. And he said one of them came down in what he calls a firecracker. He said it like exploded and then it turned into itself. Maybe an orb. I have no idea. I'm speculating, but that's the description he gave, like a firecracker. And whatever it was, it must have been bright for him to say that, I would think. Maybe an orb. I don't know. And anyway, I go, okay. I go, they were in the tree. I go, were they in like the tree in the front yard or the backyard? His bedroom's facing the front yard. And he said, in the front yard. I said, okay. I goes to the tree that's like in front of your window. He's like, yes. I go, did you see it through your window? He goes, no. He goes, I saw through the walls.
Hmm.
I go, what do you mean you saw through the walls? He's like, I could see through the walls. And I go, like X-ray vision? He's like, yes. I go, okay.
Hmm.
And he told me that, and that was essentially it on that. And then some time had passed, and that was in the morning on the way to school. So at night, I had a moment with just me and him. And I go, can you show me where in the tree that you saw these beings in the tree? And I walked out in the front yard with him, and he's pointing up in the tree limb, essentially kind of like where he'd be closest to his bed. And he said right there, and he told me that they were hanging upside down like bats. I was like, okay. And he said that, so he's out there showing me this limb and where they were potentially. And he like turns around and he sees his window right there. And it was like he was shocked that his window was right there. Something I took note of for whatever reason. But anyway, that's essentially most of what he's told me in terms of the second one. I don't know if he'll recollect more as time goes. I try not to be too pushy with asking questions. I already feel like I asked, I don't know what's too much or not, but I'm trying to be as tactful as I can. I don't want this kid to be traumatized. If I can help it, I don't know. And so of course, he knows that he can talk to me more about it if he thinks of anything. He has like described these beings to me, and very different than the red one and blue one. I even asked him within the questions I had, especially when he started telling me they were upside down in the tree. I go, do you think that they were like, they knew the red one and blue one? Like, were they connected? He said no. And so the red one and blue one were like maybe a foot to 2 feet tall. These things were big. He said the shortest one, and he said something like it was like a kid, like somehow he knew it was like young. I don't know how that's possible, but just kind of something he said. But he said the shortest one was as tall as me. And he said the other two were big, like taller than humans can be. He said something about how I don't know if all of them or if only, it seems like one was different than the other two, or much more different. And Statue Man versus these other two that were there fighting, he even mentioned. He said something like they didn't like each other. I don't know, or they were something like that. And I didn't ask too far into that. I haven't really asked much about that. But he said that the other two had like these kind of like, he calls them like spikes that came off like the shoulders, like they had like a spiky hair. And he said that they had wings. So very different than the first two beings that he may have came into contact with. But that's essentially kind of what I've got so far. And he knows that he can talk to me about it. And from my perspective, it's weird. It's like it does. And I asked him again, I go, were they nice or mean? And he said neither. Again, he like neither. But I guess all I can do, like as a parent, is kind of like he can come to me and talk to me. He knows I'm open to it. And I don't think this stuff is like, I think it's probably scary as an event in general, because it's not part of the reality we know, or especially for a 5-year-old or even a 38-year-old, and or at least that we're familiar with.
Yeah.
So I think in those terms, and just something so different, I think that's scary, of course, but I don't think he's like terrified. Like he's able to sleep in his bed. After a week or so of these behaviors of being scared, it's kind of faded. And even after the second event, it doesn't seem like he's as traumatized, the behaviors that he was like exhibiting the first time after the second event. And I asked him, did you go anywhere? Do you remember anything else? And it seems like almost like it's more fragmented than the first experience he had, because I asked him, sorry, there were a couple more questions I did ask him. I asked him, how did like they come to you? Did they wake you up, or, and he like didn't know, couldn't explain that. I said, okay, like how did you like realize they were there? He couldn't explain that. But I go, okay, how did they like leave? Did you see them leave? And the only thing he could tell me was that they camouflaged through the wall of our house, like as if they had entered our house at some point. And so that's why I think his memory of it's pretty fragmented, most likely. Because it doesn't like, granted, I don't know what steps any of this should follow, but it doesn't seem like it's cohesive as like, step 1 to 10 from when they got here and when they left. But anyway, that's pretty much, I think that's the last detail that I can even think of. Me personally, after the first account of getting more of a description of the blue and red one, I, of course, I would think most people would, but I scoured the internet trying to see if I could find anybody else talking about a red one and blue one. I even looked at like abductee drawings on like a non-filtered search engine. And I did come across a abductee drawing or experiencer drawing of these blue camouflage, just like he explained, beings going through a wall, but it looked like they were joined or accompanied with like what we call a gray. He's never explained anything like that, not a gray or the typical, alien that we all have in pop culture. But those are kind of the big crazy events that we've recently gone through, and I firmly understand it's out of my control. But I definitely want to try to piece together what I can, try to get descriptions of what I can, try to get a story together of what occurred to him if possible. And I know I can't really help or do anything necessarily to stop it, but he at least knows that he can talk to me about it, and that I'm open-minded to knowing that he's, that I trust what he's telling me is truth. There've been several times that I've asked him, did this really happen? And every time he's like, yes. And he's almost like agitated. But it's just, even though my experiences, even though everything I've read about and listened to on interviews and all these credible, Johnny Mack, he was the head of psychiatry for Harvard School of Medicine. He went and interviewed all the children of that Zimbabwe incident where the UFO landed on the playground years ago. And I mean, people that give the subject matter that much credence, and still when it like affects you or something you experience, it's almost like embedded in us to question it. Yeah. Like I'm 99.99% sure this happened, but there's just like that fragment that is like still hard to believe. So anyway, if you have any questions, that's kind of the most of it.
All right. Well, Travis, I have tons of questions for you.
Sure.
I gotta say, I really admire that you have an open mind and you let your son come to you to tell you these things. You know what I mean? Like a lot of kids, obviously, don't always have that with some parents because they're just, their mind's not open. They're kind of like in a box where it's just like work, religion, family life.
Sure.
And but yeah, no, this is a very, very interesting story. And actually, I hope that you probably come back on if you ever get any more information on it. And so for my first question, when you were in the Marine Corps, did you see anything outwardly?
No, nothing that I can recollect or remember. To be honest with you, I even more so, I had been on a couple West packs, or like going out to Iraq. We took a Navy boat or a pack of Navy ships, and I mean, out in the middle of nowhere, nothing but sky, almost not even be able to see land in the distance. I almost kicked myself for not looking up more or taking more time to go look out, all the nights we were on that ship. But no, I never really experienced anything in the military like that.
Okay. Let's see. You're in downtown Dallas, Texas. I've heard that there's actually a lot of crazy cryptids that are coming from like Mexico into Texas. And I guess it's just like a real big supernatural, I don't know, zone or some sort. So it would make sense that you're having all these encounters and experiences happening to you guys. You were mentioning about the several V's. Could you kind of describe that a little bit more? Like, where it was just like those birds you'd see in paintings, like a V like that?
Yeah. Oh, also, I've got something else to tell you too. I want to tell you about me after you get your questions. The only thing I could tell you is, like, looking at this thing and I feel like this is such a ridiculed thing. And I feel like people are so quick to jump to, you believe in them so much, you just imagine you saw it, or you just think you saw it. And so with that being said, like even me, I want to be critical of what I'm seeing. I want to be sure that I'm not making this up, that logically I'm looking at it. And if I can't think of anything logically, then what? And so, going through like a Rolodex, trying to decipher essentially what I'm looking at. One of the things that popped in my head were these dark V's I could see coming off of it. And at first I thought maybe they were flocks of flying V, black birds or geese or whatever. But when I realized that they weren't like wavering, because they always waver. I mean, they're not all exactly in unison. And I realized this thing was like a uniform, solid object. Like this was all structure connected to it.
Okay. Let's see. How big was this blanket like thing you were talking about?
So the blanket, that's essentially kind of like the best description I give it when I first saw it in the distance. It almost looked like a dark blanket at the time. Is it just the only description that kind of came in my head? Then
Kinda
I was
like-
like, is
Kind of like bees, have you ever seen bees when they're all flocked up together and they start making these designs? Was it kind of like that?
almost like a black mist in a way, kind of.
Mhm. Okay.
No, not necessarily. At that time, the only thing I could say at the time when I'm trying to decipher, and it was like in the moment of seeing it the first time, I was like, what the hell is that? And dark blanket was kind of like the only description I can give at the time, until it got more over top of me. I could see or have more clarity into what I was seeing.
What time was it when this happened?
8:30 at night.
Let's see. Is that the same time was that the same time you seen the golden orb as well?
Yep. And just to throw this out there too, my child, the 2 times he's had these nightmares, they're around the same time as well. I
Really?
don't know if there's a lot of consistency with that or not, but it was both around 2:40 or so when he came to our bedroom from these nightmares.
2:40 a.m. Yeah.
Yep.
Let's see. What did your wife think when you like pulled her out there to look at the the I think it was the bees?
Yeah, that was the like the mothership. It looked like a giant oyster shell.
Yeah.
She not much. I mean, I think that she probably thought I was a little out there, and all she was like is like, when's dinner ready? Like she didn't really care. Not something she likes to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
I can't even really discuss religion with her, unfortunately. I mean, she's not really open-minded. She lives by the principle, ignorance is bliss.
Okay.
And I can tell you now, after looking at all this stuff, I can definitely see why some would choose that path. Just not me, but I could definitely see why some might. But
Yeah, I agree. Sometimes it can be scary for people, just to
Sure.
have their whole thing, something that's not normal for them to just change,
well,
Um,
yeah, I think it's pretty easy to see that this is essentially reality changing. It's we aren't led to believe, that these things are real. It's been ridiculed, made fun of. Even when you see some of the stuff nowadays on the news, it's kind of like, call the X-Files. And on Today's Show, national news, and they'll kind of like dumb it down and make fun of it.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just the plan of disclosure. Don't freak people out. I mean, I can get that, I guess. I'd rather be taken more seriously, but I can understand that.
Now, what colors did this oyster looking ship have?
It was darker than the dark sky. The moon was out, no clouds, and it was darker than the background of the black night sky. And
So-
the only thing that had color to it was like that white luminescence that essentially kind of seemed like it was emitting off the bottom of it.
So it was kind of like camouflaging in the night then, just a little bit darker.
It's hard to, I can't say that without a doubt. It seemed very solid like, and it just seemed like it was very dark material, I would guess.
You mentioned that you seen the gold orb, and I was going to ask you how big it was, but you said if you could tell, it could be just like the size of a bus.
I'm guesstimating. Yeah. From my perspective, it's hard to say because there wasn't really anything within reference to give it an actual good guess. But it seemed, for whatever reason, the best judgment I can give, it seemed like it maybe was a couple miles away. And, using deductive reasoning, maybe the thing was, maybe it was the size of a bus. I'm not sure. But that it didn't look like it was about that big, like size of a baseball almost, from my perspective. And I could tell there was distance. I don't know how, but I could just tell you it seemed like it was a little distant. So I could only guess based on distance and how big it looked to me at the time. So
Did you hear any noises from either one of those events?
Nope.
No.
no noises. I think it's pretty miraculous that, like, the first one, I just happened to look up in the right patch of sky. And then the second one had this owl, not like directed my eyes to like search for this owl in this tree. I would have never even noticed that orb shooting off.
This is more of a statement. I was like, how weird is it that, the 2 times that you were grilling out, you would see these events happening to you,
I know.
I mean, it's either, it has to be like, obviously everything happens for a reason, or
Sure.
it's like, it was just meant for you to be out there for those events to happen,
Yeah, I'm not sure. And it kind of goes back to me saying that had I not looked in the sky at that patch, there's no way I would have seen it. No noise. And it was moving very quickly as well. The second one, it's almost like it was weird. This owl projecting this hoot. I'm telling you, it was like as if it was getting louder and louder in succession.
Yeah.
But with the distance that I would have had between it and potentially that tree, it didn't make sense. Like, that was kind of weird. I noticed the weirdness of that. And then next thing I know, this orb comes out the back end. So
It is weird. It's very strange. You mentioned you were feeling positive for a couple of weeks. How did the people around you think about it, or how did they interact with you when you were very positive?
Sure. So unfortunately, at that time, I'm trying to think. For whatever reason, I don't think I was like around a lot of people at that time for those 2 weeks.
Okay.
I think it was something that I took notice personally, but it wasn't really something that I talked about with people around me. I'm the only one in my close group of friends and family that looks into this stuff. So I don't have a lot of, outlets with people, individuals around me. And that's kind of why I initially turned to Reddit to see, if there are other people out there having these experiences, other people I connect with that are more open to talking about it. And so.
Okay. What all did the medium say when you went and seen her?
Sure. So she said I was Palladian. She said I came to Earth because of, it's like what she had told me is that our existence on Earth had something to do with free will, or a test of free will, or something of that nature. And that I must have committed to being part of that. She said that she could see that I was a shaman in a past life. The fact that she brought up the confliction I had with looking further into almost like connecting, like doing this astral projection and almost like letting go of control and becoming more like consciousness and all that stuff. When she told me, and I backed out on that guy because of, I was, life can be a roller coaster for some people. Sometimes are harder than others and more stressful than others. And at that time I was just pretty kind of stressed with everything. And I just didn't think I wanted to potentially add something more challenging to my life at that time because of what if it brought on, things that were negative or scary or anything like that. And I just didn't know if that was something that I could handle at the time personally. And so I kind of got scared and backed out on that guy. And then when she brought up that she was connecting with my 3 spirit guides, she said that they wanted to tell me that I don't need to fear looking down that path, and that essentially like I wouldn't get hurt physically or anything like that. To this day, that was probably about a year ago. To this day, I haven't exactly looked back into it, but I plan on looking back into stuff like that soon and seeing, is there something to it?
Okay. I'll definitely like to hear back from you whenever you do.
Yeah.
Go back to there. Would you or your son be able to sketch out the red and blue beings and or the camouflage, the wing beings? I like to see
Yeah,
like
I've got
look like.
yeah, I've got some of his drawings in my actually in my sock drawer in my dresser. He when he drew the red one and blue one for me, he drew the blue one with a face.
Mhm.
And part of difficulty of navigating the stuff with a 5-year-old is like, I'm trying to determine what is he adding additionally, and it's hard because I wasn't the one that experienced these things, but he drew with a face, and I asked him, I go, did it have a face? He's like, no. I go, well, then please don't draw a face on it. I want you
Yeah.
to draw it just like you saw it.
Yeah.
And but yeah, I can definitely send you some pictures of those along with the more recent drawings he's done of these other beings that came potentially on
Yeah.
the second visit. They're very different than the red one and blue one.
Okay. Yeah, I'm very intrigued. I like to
Yeah.
check those out. Let's see. It's so crazy that you can tell when a kid is being so honest because they can vividly, especially, your son, he's telling you the same things every single day. It's more vividly each time,
Yeah. And that's something I've taken notice. It's almost like as if he's able to recollect more detail over time.
Mhm.
And for the most part, a lot of it, if there's such a thing, has seemed to stay consistent.
Mhm.
And so anyway, daggone, so sorry. So anyway, what was your question to start with? I'm so sorry, I kind of lost it.
No,
Now.
it was more of a statement, just saying,
Sure.
he was able to, keep telling you the same details and it stays so vividly with you, so.
Sure. And yeah, and along with his descriptions and stuff, when he's like referencing his body to show me the height and then the behaviors, and then not wanting to, if I ask maybe one or two questions and it's almost like it gets to be too much and he doesn't want to talk about it anymore. And some of the things that, of course, this was not easy, but I did tell my wife about it. The first event did not go well. I was worried, kind of, and being in cells and connecting with people, I tactfully as possible got her to understand that, I'm just telling you what he's telling me. He doesn't listen to the stuff that I listen to or the interviews. When I listen to that stuff, it's in my car or it's in the backyard. They're asleep. I'm not listening to abduction event stories or anything around my children. That's the last thing I'd want to do, terrify the heck out of them. So I don't agree with any belief that I'm feeding into any of this stuff with him.
Now, what did he say when the red one asked him to marry him?
I don't know. I didn't ask him what he said, to be honest with you. I did ask him if he heard their voice or did they use their mouth. And I want to tell you that he said that it didn't move its mouth.
Yeah.
But I don't want to like make anything up, but I can't remember exactly if he said that it either didn't use his mouth or if he just heard it. But you hear a lot of people that come into these encounters that it's almost like telekinetic or telepathy, or it's not, it's brain to brain or mind to mind, essentially.
Yeah.
So
no, I agree.
Definitely. Yeah. So there's other things that I'm trying to catch to like give it more validation. Like if he was to tell me that he heard it, didn't see it move its mouth, and it's just another check on the box almost, that like, golly. So
you mentioned that they were pretty much close to being like jesters. And I don't know if you're familiar with DMT, but the body produces it. And a lot of times when people would, have an experience, those things are real. They're just on a whole nother realm or level
Sure,
because it's
sure.
no different than dying and seeing the thing. So, I mean, it could be very possible that those things are very super real, and maybe he can see them only because his mind's more open to it, than adult. But
So something I forgot to tell you when we were in the playroom when he was describing his dream for the first time, when I asked him, why do I need to turn the light on? Is something scaring you? When he told me that it was a nightmare, but then it was real. When they left, when my wife and older son left the room, he opened back up to talk. He said, I could see it in my brain. And
wow.
when he said that, coming from a 5-year-old, the way I took it is that he was conscious or maybe awake when he saw it. And that's the way he explained it. But that's my interpretation.
Wow.
But interesting thing that he would say.
Yeah, yeah. I've looked into a lot of things from near-death experiences and DMT and the things people see, and you know, it's just like we got a veil, and it's harder for others to see things than it is some. That's why you got those
Sure.
people who don't believe in supernatural paranormal stuff, but you have these other people that are experiencing it, you know.
Yeah,
Um,
and some of these, some of the people's recollecting their events, it's not necessarily physical in nature. Sometimes it seems to be like metaphysical,
mhm,
that
I
maybe
agree.
they're still in their bed, and when mom and dad come and check, they're still in bed. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not somewhere else, potentially like consciously or somewhere else. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's for sure. Um, you said something about there was a scary part of him saying that he was laying next to you when you were on the couch. You,
Yeah. So actually something it just made me think about something I wanted to also tell you about me. Is that the morning that he had the first event, that day, later that day, that was at 2:40 and AM. I, going my day to day, I think I went to a couple different stores, went into the grocery store and I set the alarm off walking in, and then went into 2 other different stores after the same day. It set those alarms off as well. And I've looked at this stuff before and it kind of made me wonder. And I don't know how I got to it, but I was feeling my ear, and there's like what seems to be almost like a BB right up here in my ear,
okay.
like essentially where you would tag a
Mm,
cow or something in that nature. I've never noticed it my entire life. I shaved this face, take out this ear hair now that I'm 38, and it's never something I've noticed until that day. And that was after that experience that he had the first time.
wow. And so when you asked him, and he asked him where he was, and he said he was laying on the couch with you, um, did you feel anything like spiritually, or feel him on
No,
there?
no, and to be honest with you, just speculation, I guess. But one of the things that kind of worries me is I don't know, what if I went somewhere? I have no idea.
Yeah,
Something, just throwing this out there, and it may mean nothing, but something, you hear me now?
yeah, I can hear you.
Is that better?
Yeah,
So sorry. My
yeah, you're
family's
fine.
here. Uh, not allowed to not allowed to openly talk too much about this around my wife. So. But I've personally I've looked very closely into this stuff, especially the past couple of years,
Mhm.
and I've never once had a UFO dream or an alien dream or anything like that. Um, so in the event that if there is anything happen to me, I'm not aware of it at all, aside from setting off those alarms that one day, 3 different stores, and then whatever the heck, I don't even know if that's something or not. I'm not looking to like cut into anything or check it out myself, but maybe next time I go to the doctor for a checkup, I might get them to look at it. But
Yeah, yeah. Please let me know too what you find out.
sure.
What do you think those beings are? The ones your
Who
son mentions.
who's to say? I think that naively we just expect there to be life on other planets, but who's to say they're not interdimensional? Scientists have talked about there's 11 dimensions currently that we're familiar with
Mhm.
scientifically. And who's to say they're not from another dimension, or I don't know.
Yeah.
But he one of the things that he told me, and you just made me think of it. The second visit that he had, one of the things that he told me about is that I guess the statue man, I asked him, I go, where do you think they're from? And he goes, I don't know, maybe Jupiter. I go, why Jupiter? Why you say Jupiter? He
Yeah.
said, because they showed me Jupiter cut in half. I go, what do you mean? And it was like, I go, like on a TV or a hologram? He said, yeah, on a hologram. Granted, I said hologram. I don't know if he knows what a hologram is.
Yeah.
Maybe that's me looking at too many sci-fi stuff, but the description of him talking about seeing this Jupiter cut in half was just kind of interesting. Don't know what to take from that, but that's what he shared with me.
Okay. And also, this is a statement as well. I find it interesting that he says that he's afraid to talk about it because he says it'll become more real. And I mean, obviously, we know that things can manifest when we talk about them, but
Sure.
that's why he's just giving you a little detail here and there because maybe it'll give it strength somehow and make it really physically manifest, like in front of you guys, or but they're not
I don't
bad,
know.
they're not
I
good,
don't know.
so you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
Um, what did he mention what those 25-year-olds used to cut the metal off of their chairs that they were in?
I asked him that, and I think at the time he said something like a sword or a knife. I also asked him, I go, were they boys and girls? And he said they were all boys. And then he said something like they were picking up 5-year-olds, like almost like as if from this area.
Oh wow.
So, and then at that time, that's when he had told me, and that was around the time when he had told me about seeing 2 friends that he actually recognized on the ship with him.
Wow. And
Yeah.
have you talked to them or had them come over?
No, there's one of these kids that's on my 5-year-old soccer team, to which I'm the coach of.
Okay.
And I'm kind of conflicted. Part of me almost wants to ask, but another part feels like it's kind of out of bounds. I don't know.
I think you should do it, man. You should have
I
your
mean,
son talk to him first, and then tell him that, that he's talking to you about them and just wants to know if he had the same dream or, you know.
I've got one last soccer game and one last practice. So I feel like if he shows up to one of those, I will definitely be trying to nonchalantly ask a question here and there and see just what kind of response I get.
Yeah, man, that'd be awesome.
Sure.
Why did this was at 2 in the morning? Why did he tell you that he thinks the house is haunted? Why do you think he said that?
I don't know. I think maybe that's because of, as a child, learning about like what's scary, I guess, through media, essentially through books and TV shows. I think ghosts, of course, are kind of like the most common thing, right? That scare you. And maybe not necessarily aliens, but I think that's quite a bit changed. I mean, a lot of stuff you see on kids' cartoons and stuff are almost in that way, like Pokemon and maybe. And I don't know, maybe because of ghosts are scary and these things, maybe the fact that he said our house is haunted makes me think another reason that they were in our house. I don't know. And he saw them in our house.
Yeah.
So that's kind of all I can take away from that.
Okay. Let's see. Do you see his behavior changing at all after these events, like different from who he is?
No, not in terms of like changing his personality or anything like that. I do see, and this could just be nothing, but he seems to be pretty good with math. I don't necessarily think we need to submit him to like Mensa or anything like that, but he gravitates quickly towards math and problem solving quickly. But aside from that, just the behaviors of what you would think a traumatic event would do to a child,
Yeah.
for that week after the first one happened, he just exhibited certain types of behaviors that made me think that something really did happen or scared him enough to where he's exhibiting behaviors that would follow a traumatic event.
Again, I think I got one last question for you. Did he ever tell you if he had sleep paralysis during these events?
So one of the things I asked him was about the cold, because that just might be an assumption he's making, that they like the cold because it's cold on their ship. And I asked him, I said, I go, could you move? Like when you're on the ship, like, could you move around? He said, no. His body was like frozen. And I said, well, how did you move around? He said he was like floated around. And just an assumption I'm making, but part of me wonders if him not being able to move, maybe potentially paralyzed. You hear that a lot. Maybe that's why he thought he was cold or frozen, because of he cannot articulate the fact of being like paralyzed. So maybe he just thought he was like frozen stiff. But that's something that I've kind of guessed at with it, or maybe it was cold. I don't know. One thing I did find interesting, and now it's like looking back after knowing potentially that something happened and it was cold, is that this kid would have loved to play in the snow on a random, freak snow that we get in Texas, which we never get. And he did not want to go out in the cold. He's like, it's cold outside. He was like shivering, almost like as if like, it almost kind of goes back to him saying to me that it was cold on the ship, and almost like he was exhibiting the behavior of, he was just so cold recently that no way I'm going back outside and getting in the cold again. When this is the kid before all this, that it could be wintertime outside and like 60 in our house and he'd just be in underwear, like never cold. He's never cold. It'd be cold outside and he doesn't want to wear a jacket. So it's kind of against like his little behaviors in terms of, being able to deal with the cold. So I thought that was interesting.
Okay. You said something that you said after I finished my questions. You had something you wanted to tell me as well. Do you remember what that is?
Sorry. It kind of went back to, you actually brought it up.
Okay.
It went back to when I had told you that I was sleeping on the couch the night that the first event happened. And so when he was telling me that he saw it go through the ceiling, which he would have had to pass me on the couch to see this thing go through the ceiling, I was sleeping in that area. I asked him, I go, did you see Daddy on the couch? Because like, how did you see this thing go up the ceiling? Like, he must not have been in his room. And that's when he said something like, yeah, I was laying on the couch with you, like next to you. And just in my mind, just speculation, I'm like, did I go somewhere? Did we get put next to each other? Was he cognizant of it, yet Daddy just doesn't remember anything purposely? Who knows? I don't know. So that just kind of makes me wonder. And then on the fact that I set those alarms off, I don't know if I'm being paranoid after all this, but like I set those alarms off, never happened in my life. In 3 different stores, back to back, same day. And then finding, I don't know what this is, if it's anything, if it's a calcium thing, it's not in my other ear. I've never been around BB guns. This is a newer discovery. And it just makes me wonder, just saying.
Wow. Do you think that you might try to put like a camera up where you can watch your son and record him to see if something's actually physically happening to him, like he's getting up? And
yeah, I am. Sooner than later, I think might get one for like his bedroom and one for the living room, potentially facing the wall that they would have gone through from the living room to his bedroom, just to see if we catch anything. I've also got an eye ring on our door, which I don't know if it could have, but it could have caught something on the tree. Unfortunately, my wife has it set to where it doesn't record at night because of, she doesn't want to be woken up to bright lights coming off her phone next to her face in bed. And I said, maybe you should turn it on. So if it does record something, we just look at it the next day if he has a nightmare. So going forward, we're going to be much more observant, or I am, in those types of ways. Just see if we get anything.
Okay. Yeah. Well, Travis, I really appreciate having you on, man. Your stories are just amazing, honestly. I hope to hear more from you and have you back on to, give us an update on everything.
Sure.
Is there?
Yeah, I'd like to.
Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying I would
Oh,
love
okay.
to. If this continue, if the saga continues, yeah, I would definitely like to share. More than anything, I would definitely like to see if there's other people out there that have had similar experiences. In terms of if I was to give any advice, if I am someone to give, um, I think the subject matter is so ridiculed. Maybe that's changing now, but it's difficult to have these curiosities and this fascination with things, and then coming to realize that life isn't the way we've all been led to believe exactly. There's a lot more to it, and a lot more to our existence and what's around us. And more than anything, I just want him to know that he can come to me and talk to me. And I'm open-minded, and I'm not going to shoot down or disbelieve, um, or be closed-minded to anything he, experiences and wants to tell me about. So I think that's kind of the biggest thing, is just listen and just be there as a support structure if needed. And more than anything, share with others, especially others that are like-minded and curious about this as well, trying to figure out things. I don't think we'll get anywhere hoping that the government's going to tell us a lot, or that science is all of a sudden going to start telling us a lot about this. I think if things like this were really happening, they probably wouldn't. It would probably be a pretty slow creep to tell us of the existence of this, because I think people would probably freak out a bit, like realizing we're not the apex we thought we were. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just a lot of change and a lot of reality change to someone that hasn't had an experience. And I've always been a big believer of, I'm not going to convince anybody to think totally different and to have a different perspective on reality. I think the biggest thing that does change people's minds is their own experiences. And so with that being said, I feel like it's biggest to connect with those that do experience these things and get an understanding of what they've gone through, just to have more information essentially about topics that we don't get a lot of information from freely. So we have to join together and as like a community essentially and share.
I agree. All right. Well, with that being said, Travis, I appreciate you giving your closing comments and advice for others that might be, having the same thing going. I appreciate having you on the show, and thank you, viewers, for watching this episode. And other than that, I hope you guys have a great evening, and we'll see you later.
Thanks so much.